I was already standing there when his live stream started, framed accidentally in the corner of his phone like background furniture. He was leaning against the Porsche, engine off, but ego running hot, talking to thousands of people who believed proximity to shine meant ownership of substance. His voice was loud, playful, careless in that way people get when applause arrives without effort. The car behind him was treated like a prop, something that existed only to confirm the story he was selling about himself. He laughed at his own jokes, pacing slightly, gesturing with hands that had never signed the paperwork that mattered. The chat scrolled fast, compliments flying, numbers climbing. He had no reason to look at me. In his mind, I belonged to the environment, not the moment. That is when he flicked the rag in my direction, the casual toss of someone who assumes obedience is automatic. The cloth landed near my feet, not aggressively, just confidently, like a habit. He smiled without looking, called me sweetheart, the word floating out easily, rehearsed from years of never being corrected. When I did not move, his tone shifted just enough to draw laughs from his audience. He asked if I was deaf, louder this time, performing impatience for engagement. The chat reacted exactly as expected. Laughter multiplied. Approval surged. The performance demanded escalation, and he delivered it without hesitation. I stayed still, not frozen, not offended, simply finished with what I already knew. I did not react because reacting would have meant acknowledging authority he did not possess. While he entertained strangers, my attention was on time. Minutes. Windows. Procedures already in motion. The Porsche behind him was not a trophy to me. It was collateral, a line item tied to missed obligations, tracked quietly long before the camera ever turned on. What he saw as status, I saw as structure. A vehicle secured against promises that were not kept. The shine did not impress me because shine fades faster than records. I had read every notice sent, every reminder ignored, every extension granted. None of that fit into a live stream narrative, so he never mentioned it. He did not need to. Confidence covered the silence, or so he believed. Experience teaches you to listen for what is not being said. It teaches you that volume often hides avoidance, and jokes are sometimes shields. Standing there, I felt no urge to correct him. Correction is for conversations. This was accounting. Numbers do not debate. Timelines do not negotiate. They arrive on schedule, whether someone is ready or not. There is a moment before consequences appear when everything feels suspended. People mistake that pause for safety. It is not. It is alignment. Paperwork catching up. Signals connecting. Decisions leaving offices and becoming action. That moment stretched quietly while he kept talking, unaware it was already over. Preparation is invisible until impact forces everyone to acknowledge reality. His audience watched him, but they did not see what I saw. They saw youth, speed, certainty. I saw imbalance. I saw someone confusing attention with insulation. The rag stayed on the ground. The jokes kept coming. The Porsche remained still, waiting, like everything does when systems are about to speak. Then the sound arrived, low at first, mechanical, unfamiliar to his rhythm. A flatbed truck turning the corner has a voice of its own, steady, indifferent, impossible to rush. Heads turned. Comments slowed. His smile hesitated for half a second, just long enough for reality to step closer. I did not raise my voice. I checked my watch. Again calmly. Most people thought the Porsche belonged to him because it appeared behind him every day, polished, loud, and perfectly framed for admiration. Ownership today is often confused with proximity, and repeated exposure creates belief without verification. The car was always present in his content, parked strategically, used as proof of success rather than a tool of transport. What viewers never saw was the paperwork that defined its true status. Vehicles like that do not answer to charisma. They answer to signatures, schedules, and conditions written long before any audience applauds. Those documents existed quietly, enforceable, patient, and indifferent to popularity. The financing itself was ordinary, almost boring, which is why it works. A structured loan, asset-backed, dependent on consistent payments rather than internet momentum. He made the early installments easily, writing initial sponsorships and sudden attention. Then came delays explained away as timing issues, followed by partial payments framed as misunderstandings. Grace periods were applied, notices sent, reminders acknowledged and ignored. Every step followed procedure. No shortcuts, no emotions, only timelines that narrowed quietly while confidence stayed loud. Each missed obligation accumulated weight, transforming a luxury image into a measurable liability recognized by institutions, not audiences seeking entertainment daily. Flashy income is unpredictable, no matter how confident it looks on screen. Sponsorship money arrives irregularly, algorithms shift without warning, and attention migrates faster than bills forgive. He earned loudly but inconsistently, mistaking bursts of cash for stability. Real ownership demands boring discipline, the kind that survives quiet months without applause. When cash flow spikes replace steady commitments, assets remain controlled by lenders, not personalities. What appears wealthy can still be rented by the month. This distinction separates performance from permanence, and experience recognizes the difference immediately without hesitation, calculation, or emotional involvement whatsoever, especially under public pressure situations daily. The illusion worked because viewers equate visibility with success. Repetition builds trust even when foundations are weak. A car shown daily feels owned, just as authority spoken confidently feels legitimate. Yet real ownership lives in files, registries, and obligations honored over time. I was not interested in his image or his following. My concern was alignment between agreement and behavior. That difference is where responsibility reveals itself without announcement. Age teaches that accountability is quiet, cumulative, and unavoidable once deadlines expire, regardless of fame, volume, or how convincingly someone performs confidence online daily, publicly, repeatedly, without substance beneath it all. My role was never about confrontation. It was custodial, procedural, and deliberately restrained. I oversee agreements, not egos. When terms fail, actions follow without commentary. Standing there, I represented the invisible side of success, the side that does not trend but endures. Years of experience condition patience, discipline, and respect for systems that function without applause or permission. Built slowly, tested repeatedly, enforced consistently, regardless of personalities involved across contracts, markets, cycles, seasons, and reputations that rise and fall over time. He mistook my calm for irrelevance, the same way he mistook access for ownership. Visibility does not replace responsibility. He did not invent this behavior. He was shaped by a world that applauds noise before it rewards skill, a world where confidence is measured in decibels and not in depth. The culture that surrounded him had taught him early that speaking loudly was the same as being right, that a following was the same as a foundation, and that applause was a substitute for achievement. When a camera is always on, reflection becomes unnecessary. His value came from reaction, not contribution. Each day he performed, repeating the same persona because the audience rewarded exaggeration, not consistency. In a life built on constant visibility, silence becomes suspicious, and anyone quiet is mistaken for someone lesser. This world creates a certain kind of entitlement, one that is not supported by any real structure. He lived in a bubble where people did not correct him, they complimented him. They did not evaluate him, they followed him. With every sponsorship deal and viral clip, the illusion grew thicker. Success arrived fast, but it had no roots. There was no discipline beneath it, no understanding of obligation. The Porsche was part of that illusion. It was a costume piece worn for a role he thought he had mastered. The culture that raised him made it easy to believe that props were the same as achievements, and that attention was the same as respect. Ageism arrived disguised as charm and confidence. Every interaction he had with older professionals was filtered through the belief that experience belonged to the past. He believed that technology had replaced wisdom, that youth meant relevance, and that speed was superior to comprehension. To him, anyone above a certain age was background. This belief is common where he comes from, a space where older voices are dismissed as slow, outdated, or unnecessary. In his mind, I belonged in a service role because he could not imagine someone older standing in a position of authority over him. He saw age's decline, not depth, and that blindness shaped every word he used. His assumption that I was staff came from the same place. His world had taught him that authority looks like youth and noise and branding. Quiet presence, professional posture, and measured demeanor did not fit the influencers he admired. He categorized everything instantly and incorrectly. Someone his age wearing expensive sneakers must be the owner. Someone my age standing calmly must be the help. He never questioned this logic because his environment never forced him to. In his circles, older women rarely held power, at least not visibly. They appeared in supporting roles, not leading ones. So when I stood beside the car, he spoke to me the way he spoke to baristas and event assistants, people he believed existed only to enable his image. What he failed to understand was that authority does not announce itself. It does not perform. It does not seek approval or applause. It stands quietly because it does not need an audience. Experience teaches you to observe before acting, to let someone reveal themselves before responding. He did the revealing for both of us. His arrogance was not personal. It was inherited, shaped by algorithms and instant validation. He mistook volume for influence and assumed performance was power. He could not see beyond his own reflection, and that blindness prepared the ground for everything that followed. He confused attention with power. He had posed with the Porsche so many times that he believed the car responded to his personality rather than to a contract. It sat behind him like a loyal companion in every video, a silent witness to his rise and his exaggerated stories. What he never mentioned to his followers was the line he signed months earlier, the one that defined every right he had over that vehicle. The contract did not care about his charm or his visibility. It cared only about commitments, dates, and numbers. His confidence blinded him to the seriousness of the document, but the document never blinked. It stored every obligation with perfect memory and waited patiently. The repossession clause sat in the lower half of the agreement, written in plain language. There was no mystery in it, no hidden trap. It simply stated that failure to make payments within the allowed time frame would activate recovery procedures. He skimmed it during the signing, nodding without understanding, already imagining how the Porsche would look in his videos. Excitement replaced attention, and impatience erased caution. The clause did not need him to understand. It required only his signature, which he gave with enthusiasm, unaware that he was authorizing future consequences. Once the first missed payment occurred, the system logged it automatically. When the second arrived, notifications were sent. The third created the threshold that triggered the clause. There was nothing emotional or punitive about it. It was mathematics applied through legal structure. He thought silence meant forgiveness, but silence in business often means preparation. Automated processes advance through their stages, each step recorded with accuracy. His public life was chaotic and unpredictable. The system behind his contract was the opposite. It was steady, unchanging, and immune to persuasion. No confrontation was needed because none was required. Repossession is not a debate. It is an execution of terms already agreed upon. I did not need to argue with him or demand compliance. I did not need to explain the timeline or the consequences. The contract had already done that long before he ever posted his first video with the car in the background. Everything was aligned before I even arrived on site. My role was to verify, not to negotiate. His opinion of me had no influence on the outcome because his behavior was no longer part of the equation. When the tow truck appeared, it was not acting on my authority. It was responding to the contract. People often assume that a person makes the decision to repossess, but mature professionals know better. Systems make the decision. We simply witness their execution. My presence beside the vehicle was procedural. Even if he had apologized or tried to charm his way out of the situation, nothing would have changed. The clause had been activated days earlier. By the time the truck turned the corner, everything was already decided. He believed I pressed a button or made a phone call. In truth, the process had been unfolding long before our paths crossed. The paperwork carried more weight than either of us. The contract held authority, not the personalities involved. Watching the tow operator secure the Porsche, I felt no triumph and no irritation. There was simply alignment between action and agreement. Experience teaches you that emotion clouds judgment, but documents remain clear. The most powerful moments in business are often quiet. They do not require raised voices or pointed fingers. They require understanding of structure. Paper never raises its voice. The live stream had been running smoothly at first. His audience was lively, pouring in with their usual flood of compliments and emojis. He basked in their attention like someone who believed applause was a form of protection. He kept adjusting the camera to make sure the Porsche gleamed in the background, tilting his head just enough to keep himself and the car in perfect alignment. Everything about the scene was curated for admiration. That is why he noticed the tow truck only when it entered the frame, a large quiet presence that did not fit the story he was telling. The moment the truck appeared behind him, the chat changed. At first, they reacted playfully, asking if he planned another stunt or a collaboration. He glanced over his shoulder, offered a forced laugh, and returned to his exaggerated gestures. The camera continued streaming, capturing every second of his confusion. The truck kept moving forward until it blocked part of the Porsche from view. His audience noticed before he did. Comments shifted from excitement to questions. Some asked if he had parked incorrectly. Others wondered if the truck was lost. A few typed alerts in capital letters, trying to warn him that the situation looked serious. He finally turned fully around, and that was when the smile began to slip. It did not fall all at once. It cracked, hesitated, then deteriorated in small visible pieces. His eyes widened before his mouth tightened. The performance he had maintained so easily minutes earlier started to unravel under the pressure of something he could not control. The camera stayed on, recording him in real time, capturing the exact moment confidence gave way to fear. Viewers who had tuned in for entertainment found themselves watching a shift in authority instead. His voice trembled slightly when he asked the tow operator why the truck was there. The operator did not raise his voice. He simply stated the facts. The car was being recovered. It matched the plate number. Everything was in order. The audience kept commenting rapidly now, the tone shifting again. Some doubted what they were seeing. Others recognized the truth immediately. Influencer culture thrives on flawless illusions, but live streams do not allow edits or second takes. Reality had entered the frame, and nothing he said could push it out. He turned toward me then, expecting frantic energy or embarrassment. Instead, he found calm. I answered his questions clearly and quietly. Each response contrasted sharply with his rising panic. He gestured wildly, searching for a way to save face in front of thousands. I stood still, explaining the process with the same tone I would use in a boardroom or during a routine inspection. His viewers watched the difference between noise and structure play out in front of them. He tried to shift the blame, suggesting an error or misunderstanding, but the tow operator continued preparing the vehicle without hesitation. The audience saw everything. They saw the truck, the paperwork, my composure, and his unraveling confidence. Comments turned from sympathy to scrutiny. Someone pointed out the dates on the notices. Another reminded him that image is not ownership. A few simply wrote that the moment felt overdue. The stream that usually gave him power now documented his loss of it. Nothing in the frame favored him anymore. When the Porsche was lifted, a silence filled the space where his bravado used to be. The car rose slowly, leaving him standing alone on camera with nothing to lean on. His audience kept watching, waiting for an explanation he could not give. What they witnessed was simple. The internet saw who owned what. When he finally ended the live stream, the room changed instantly. The bright persona he had been performing dissolved, as if someone had removed a mask he had worn too long. His shoulders dropped first, then his expression hardened into something sharper and unfiltered. Without the audience watching, he no longer needed charm. What remained was the tone of a young man who believed consequence was optional. He stepped closer, closing the space between us, as if proximity would restore control. His voice lowered, but the tension inside it revealed more truth than anything he had said online. The shift was immediate. Performance evaporated and entitlement took its place. The first thing he offered was a threat. He spoke quickly, insisting that he would call his manager, his agent, his lawyer, anyone who could intimidate or delay the process. None of the names mattered because none of them were connected to the contract he ignored. When the threats produced no reaction, he shifted to bargaining. He promised immediate payment, then partial repayment, then creative alternatives that made sense only in a world where attention was currency. Each offer was wrapped in urgency but not substance. He believed enthusiasm could replace obligation. It never could. When bargaining failed, the insults arrived. They came in waves, each one intended to provoke. He questioned my competence, then my presence, then my authority. He pointed at the tow truck and accused everyone involved of working against him. The insults became more personal with each breath. Age became his favorite weapon. He claimed I could not understand the pressures of his world. He suggested that people my age should not be making decisions that affected him. He said it with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been challenged outside a screen. Through all of it, I stayed procedural. I repeated the facts and clarified the steps exactly as they appeared in the documents. My tone never changed because the situation did not require emotion, only structure. He mistook calmness for weakness and silence for hesitation, but experience teaches you that reacting only fuels chaos. I knew every stage of the process, and I knew nothing he said could alter the terms he had agreed to long before I ever met him. There was no need to correct his assumptions or defend myself against his accusations. The only task was completion of procedure. He tried one final strategy. He attempted to regain superiority by implying that someone like me must be desperate for authority. He said it softly, almost triumphantly, thinking he had uncovered a vulnerability. I simply continued the procedure. The tow operator secured the vehicle and confirmed each step while I reviewed the checklist. Not one insult required a response because none of them held relevance. Age grants you the clarity to separate noise from substance. He ran out of words eventually. The adrenaline burned off and the room settled into a heavy quiet. That is when the truth appeared on his face. Without the camera, without the audience, and without the Porsche, he no longer had anything to lean on. His anger faded into something closer to recognition. He stood there watching a process he could not interrupt, finally understanding its weight. Respect only appears when leverage disappears. In that silence, he seemed smaller, not physically, but in certainty. He realized that the tools he relied on for influence carried no force in this environment. What mattered here was follow-through, not performance. Watching him accept that reality was not satisfying but instructive. It showed how quickly image dissolves when accountability arrives, revealing consequence without spectacle or noise. The moment had grown strangely quiet after his burst of anger faded. He stood near the Porsche, breathing fast, looking between me and the tow truck as if searching for a break in the process. The noise of his live stream was gone. Only the mechanical hum of the hydraulic system preparing to lift the car filled the space. Without the camera and without the audience, his confidence had nowhere to anchor itself. He kept asking questions that had already been answered, hoping one of them might open a small door back to control. I watched him cycle through confusion, irritation, and disbelief, the emotional arc of someone realizing that neither outrage nor performance could influence the outcome. The tow driver walked toward us, clipboard in hand, boots hitting the pavement with the heavy sound of someone who had done this work for decades. He was focused and efficient, the kind of person who speaks only when necessary. He checked the plate number, examined the documents I handed him, and then looked at the young man who had spent the morning presenting himself as untouchable. The driver took a slow breath as if recognizing the type. Then he spoke in a steady voice that carried more authority than any of the influencer's earlier theatrics. "Ma'am, is this the repo?" He did not raise his tone. He did not aim for drama. He simply asked the question that confirms the end of denial. It echoed between us with a clarity that stripped away any remaining illusions. The young man reacted instantly, stepping forward as if the wording itself had offended him. He began to argue, insisting that there must be an error, that the truck had the wrong location, that someone needed to verify the information again. The driver did not move. He waited for my response. I nodded once. It was a small gesture. It required no explanation. It required no detail. The nod carried everything that needed to be communicated. It marked the shift from conversation to conclusion. He opened his mouth again, trying to negotiate a last-minute reversal, but the moment had already passed. By the time someone must ask that question, the contract is no longer a discussion. It is an instruction. The tow driver returned to the vehicle without engaging in argument. He had no interest in the influencer's panic or attempts to reclaim the narrative. The driver operated within procedure. He secured the straps with calm precision while the young man hovered helplessly beside him, repeating questions that no longer changed anything. Each click of the ratchet tightened reality around him. His voice grew thinner as the truck prepared to lift the car. The driver did not respond to his accusations or pleas. Experience had taught him that emotion does not alter mechanical processes. The silence from my side unsettled him most. He kept looking at me, waiting for hesitation. Older professionals know that hesitation is the true weak point in any decision. When he found none, something inside him shifted. He stopped speaking for the first time since the morning began. Without words, without audience, and without momentum, he faced an outcome shaped by his own choices. The Porsche rose slowly from the ground, metal and weight moving upward with deliberate certainty. The process was not dramatic. It was inevitable. The tow driver checked every strap, stepped back, and signaled completion without ceremony. There were no final speeches or warnings. The work was done. As the truck pulled away, he stood motionless, unable to create a version of the story that favored him. I watched him try to understand what had just happened. Systems do not argue. People often assume that silence means cruelty, as if withholding a warning is a form of punishment. In reality, silence in professional matters is often the final stage of a long sequence of attempts to resolve a problem. He believed the repossession arrived without notice because he lived in a world where last-minute improvisation could fix anything. But long before the tow truck ever appeared, the process had been unfolding in plain sight. The first notice was sent electronically, a friendly reminder explaining the overdue balance and inviting him to correct it. He opened it without reading, then moved on to another message that promised more excitement. A second notice followed days later. This one was clearer, firmer, and required no interpretation. The message requested immediate action and provided direct contact information. It remained unopened for a week. When it was finally viewed, it was scrolled through quickly and dismissed with the casual confidence of someone who trusts momentum more than structure. By the time the third notice was issued, the tone had shifted. It described consequences, timelines, and procedures. It explained exactly what would happen if he continued to ignore communication. He never responded. Emails followed the notices. Each one was written with professionalism and patience. The first email invited a conversation. The second explained the risks of delay. The third outlined the contract terms in detail. His inbox showed all three as delivered. None were answered. He preferred messages from brands and followers because those confirmed the world he wanted to live in, a world where attention excused responsibility. Administrative correspondence did not offer validation, so he avoided it, telling himself he was too busy to deal with minor technicalities. Arrogance grew in the space where accountability should have lived. He assumed that consequences applied to other people, not to someone with a visible platform. The more he ignored communication, the more confident he became that nothing serious would follow. He believed that his lifestyle protected him. He believed that his audience protected him. He believed that charm could repair any oversight. Each belief pushed him further from reality. There is a kind of confidence that feels strong but is actually fragile. It swells easily and collapses quickly because it is built on impressions rather than on commitments. My silence came only after every channel had been exhausted. By the time I stepped onto the property, nothing I could have said would have changed the outcome. This was not a negotiation. It was a fulfillment of terms he had agreed to. Speaking earlier would have created the illusion that I had the power to reverse the process. I did not. The system was already moving, guided by documents, dates, and procedures that leave no room for improvisation. I did not warn him because warnings were already given. They arrived with clarity, consistency, and time. They were accessible, readable, and simple to act upon. Silence was not neglect. It was professionalism. Once a process reaches its final stage, the role of the professional is to ensure compliance, not debate history. Older generations understand this instinctively because they have lived through systems that reward discipline and expose avoidance. He mistook my silence for indifference, but silence in this context was structure. It allowed the process to unfold without emotional interference. It allowed dignity to remain intact on both sides. He could have changed the outcome long before I arrived. He chose not to. The morning of the repossession was not a surprise. It was a conclusion. Warnings were given. Volume replaced listening. When the Porsche disappeared at the end of the street, he stood still as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He believed the loss was limited to the vehicle, a single object lifted from one place to another. What he did not understand yet was that the true damage had already begun long before the engine cooled on the truck bed. In the world he lived in, the car had been more than transportation. It had been the centerpiece of his image, the visual proof of the lifestyle he claimed to represent. Its absence created a void that exposed the fragility of the narrative he built around himself. Within hours, clips from his live stream began circulating across the platforms that once amplified him. Viewers replayed the moment the tow truck entered the frame. Some laughed. Others questioned. A few offered sympathy. But the dominant response was curiosity followed by doubt. That doubt caused the first fracture in his brand. People who followed him for confidence and luxury now wondered how much of his story was real. Image-driven success depends on belief. Once belief is shaken, the foundation becomes unstable. He had always controlled his presentation. For the first time, the story was no longer his to edit. Sponsors noticed immediately. They watch audience behavior closely, tracking sentiment and engagement with precision. When comments shift from admiration to suspicion, they pay attention. His upcoming promotional contracts were quietly reevaluated. A few messages were sent to him asking for clarification. He responded with bravado, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. Companies do not rely on emotion. They look for consistency, reliability, and the ability to maintain credibility without public turbulence. His situation raised questions that brands prefer to avoid. A sponsor hesitating is more dangerous than a sponsor withdrawing because hesitation signals that risk has been detected. As the day continued, the hesitation spread. He hoped that posting upbeat stories and light-hearted explanations would smooth everything over, but credibility once fractured does not repair with humor. His attempt to joke about the repossession only deepened the uncertainty. Some viewers defended him, but many began expressing doubts they had never voiced before. They wondered if the car had ever been fully his. They wondered what other things he had exaggerated. Doubt is contagious, especially in communities built on perception. Each question chipped away at the authority he believed he possessed. The shift in audience trust was subtle at first. Views remained high, but engagement changed tone. People who once praised every move now analyzed his expressions. They looked for signs of embarrassment, signs of financial strain, signs that the confident young man on their screen had been performing more than he admitted. The loss of the car was symbolic because it removed the object that had validated his status. Without it, his persona had to stand on its own. His audience quickly realized that the shine they admired came more from props than from character. That realization carried deeper consequences than he anticipated. Influence depends on the perception of upward momentum. Once the momentum reverses, viewers shift their attention to someone else. He tried to restore control by creating new content, but the comment sections kept returning to the moment of repossession. People were no longer listening to his advice. They were analyzing his mistakes. He believed he could move past the incident with confidence alone. Instead, he had entered a narrative he could not control. What he lost that day was not the Porsche. It was the belief that he was untouchable, the trust of sponsors, the easy admiration of viewers, and the illusion of credibility that had taken years to build. Reputation depreciates faster than cars. When the tow truck disappeared and the commotion settled, I felt no rush of triumph. The moment did not call for celebration. It called for reflection. What happened that morning had unfolded through structure, not emotion. The young man had lost more than he understood, but my own gains were different. They were not loud. They were not dramatic. They appeared slowly, through the quiet observations of people who had been watching the situation closely. Partners, colleagues, and decision-makers noticed the way I handled everything. They saw consistency where others might have chosen confrontation. That recognition carried more weight than any public victory could offer. The first sign came from a senior partner who rarely comments on operational matters. He approached me later that day, not with congratulations, but with acknowledgement. He mentioned the professionalism he observed and the steadiness with which I managed each stage of the procedure. In environments built on accountability, calm execution is valued far more than bold authority. His approval was subtle, yet unmistakable. It confirmed that the work people respect most is often the work done without spectacle. He appreciated that I had upheld the integrity of the agreement without allowing myself to be drawn into chaos. My boundaries were reinforced without needing to be spoken aloud. The young man had assumed he could push, provoke, or bargain his way out of consequences. When none of those attempts shifted my position, everyone present understood that I did not operate through fear or ego. Boundaries become clearer when tested, not when declared. The incident showed that I remained steady even under pressure. It reminded people that I did not need to defend authority because authority grounded in structure defends itself. Those who observed the moment recognized that discipline, not volume, guided my decisions. Internally, the experience delivered a quiet confirmation of my role. Years of responsibility teach you that certain situations define your standing more effectively than any performance review. When processes unfold exactly as intended and you remain composed throughout, you learn something about your own capability. Not every professional moment reveals growth. Some simply prove alignment. This one did. It affirmed that I understood the system, respected the system, and could guide it without hesitation. That kind of validation does not need applause. It settles in the mind like a reminder of purpose. People sometimes assume that calmness means detachment. In truth, calmness is a form of strength earned with time. When I left the property, I did not feel victorious. I felt composed. There was a clarity that comes from knowing you acted correctly and allowed the process to speak for itself. Celebration would have cheapened the moment. The situation did not call for joy. It called for steadiness. A vehicle had been recovered. A contract had been upheld. A narrative built on illusion had been confronted by reality. Nothing more needed to be added. The silence afterward felt like its own reward. There was no need to explain myself, no need to justify my decisions, and no need to recount the events for recognition. Those who mattered understood. Those who observed learned. Those who doubted earlier reconsidered. Silence has a way of settling into the spaces that noise cannot reach. It deepens understanding. It preserves dignity. It allows the truth to stand without competition. As the day continued, I noticed how easily the experience blended into the broader flow of work. There were no dramatic retellings, only a subtle shift in how people addressed me. Respect had grown quietly, woven into the atmosphere like a steady current. I did not need to speak for it to appear. Silence compounds. For years, he had been praised as a genius because he moved quickly. His world measured intelligence by speed, visibility, and the appearance of knowing everything before anyone else. He lived in an environment where fast decisions were celebrated and slow thinking was dismissed as hesitation. The myth of youthful genius grows easily in a culture that rewards immediacy. Every new idea feels revolutionary when no one has taken the time to test it. He believed speed made him powerful. What he never understood was that speed without structure collapses under the first weight of responsibility. Experience views speed differently. It knows speed can be useful, but only when supported by a foundation that does not shift with emotion or applause. Young professionals often rush forward assuming motion equals progress. They forget that movement without direction leads to the same destination as standing still. He built his brand around rapid enthusiasm. He accepted opportunities without reading details and presented confidence without preparation. His followers celebrated his energy, unaware of the cracks forming beneath the surface. Fast growth is appealing until it meets the slow precision of mature systems. Confidence shaped him more than discipline. He believed that sounding sure was the same as being right. In his videos, he spoke with unwavering certainty, even when he understood very little about the subjects he discussed. That confidence impressed people who lacked experience, but it did not impress the documents that governed his responsibilities. Consistency would have protected him, but consistency is built quietly and requires patience. He preferred immediate gratification. His confidence was a performance. His consistency was non-existent. Older generations understand the difference instinctively. They have lived long enough to see confidence rise and fall like weather. They have learned that the strongest decisions come from understanding, not volume. They know that momentum can shift in a moment when something as simple as a missed payment reveals larger patterns of avoidance. Experience watches behavior. It does not listen to promises or performances. It remembers what youth forgets. Systems favor those who follow through, not those who speak loudly. That is why youthful arrogance often walks directly into traps it created for itself. He believed that consequences only happened to people who lack charm or ambition. He believed rules were flexible when someone had an audience. He believed maturity was a limitation. The trap waiting for him was not designed out of malice. It was built into the structure he ignored. Every missed notice, every ignored email, every assumption of immunity tightened the boundaries that eventually held him in place. The trap was made of his own decisions. Experience simply waited. When the repossession finally took place, he saw it as an attack. What he did not see was that each step had been predetermined by his earlier choices. Older professionals understand this sequence because they have witnessed it repeatedly. They know that youthful confidence often blinds people to the predictable patterns that lead to downfall. They also know that structure protects itself. Experience designs systems to catch what enthusiasm overlooks. As the day unfolded, he kept trying to find a shortcut, a loophole, a moment of negotiation that could reverse what had already happened. None existed. The exit had been designed long before he reached it. That is the part youth rarely understands. The most important outcomes are shaped by preparation, not personality. They are determined by habits, not charisma. He believed he was untouchable because he moved fast. He thought speed gave him the power to avoid accountability. But speed without awareness leads directly to the door experience has already marked. He reached that door sooner than he ever expected. Experience designs the exit. When the truck disappeared and the property grew quiet again, I felt no urge to check what he posted afterward. His online world had never been my concern. I had stepped into his space only because the situation required it, not because I was invested in the person he pretended to be on camera. Once the procedure was complete, there was nothing left for me to observe. People often expect moments like this to come with curiosity, a desire to revisit the incident and watch how someone manages their public embarrassment. Age teaches something different. Peace comes from letting events end where they end. I knew that clips from the live stream would circulate and that opinions would spread the way they always do when surprise collides with arrogance. But I did not look for them. His downfall, if he experienced one, was not my story to follow. It belonged to the choices he made, not to my presence on that morning. Older generations understand the discipline of emotional distance. We learn that closure is not about doors slamming shut. It is about walking forward without looking back. I had fulfilled my role. The system had completed its cycle. There was nothing more to analyze and nothing more to witness. Consequences were already in motion long before he realized they existed. I do not watch consequences. I design them. If you are listening at this stage of life, you already know that survival in any professional environment has never depended on how loudly you defend yourself. It has depended on the strength of the structure you build around your work and the discipline with which you protect it. Younger colleagues chase visibility. They chase applause. They chase moments. But maturity teaches you that the most powerful decisions unfold quietly, in rooms where noise cannot contaminate judgment. You have lived enough years to understand that respect earned through consistency lasts longer than admiration gained through performance. Do not waste your time arguing with disrespect. The people who aim their frustration at you are often reacting to their own unpreparedness. They project disappointment because they do not know how to manage responsibility. Every disrespectful comment hides a fear they cannot admit. Engaging with it only drags you into a conflict you do not need. Silence frustrates the unprepared. It protects the seasoned. You do not owe explanations to those who have not earned the right to receive them. Let your standards speak for you. Let your boundaries answer what your voice does not need to address. Avoid performing authority. You do not need dramatic gestures or raised tones to confirm your position. Authority built on experience carries its own gravity. People feel it even when you say nothing. They adjust their behavior around it. They learn quickly that you are not moved by impulse and not threatened by noise. Years of responsibility have shaped your instincts. Trust them. They are stronger than the insecurity of anyone trying to provoke you. What matters is not how loudly you communicate your role, but how consistently you honor it. What you must own is structure. Structure protects you when opinion shifts. Structure shields you when personalities clash. Structure preserves your position even when younger colleagues believe speed is more valuable than comprehension. At this point in life, you understand the long arc of consequence. You know that systems are built to outlast enthusiasm. A decision grounded in structure will always endure longer than one grounded in excitement. When someone ignores process, let the process correct them. When someone underestimates the rules, let the rules clarify reality. Your strength is not in confrontation. It is in alignment. There will be moments when voices around you rise, demanding attention, demanding urgency, demanding reactions. You do not need to meet their volume. You have lived long enough to know that noise fades quickly. When voices fail, systems remain. Systems hold the truth that emotions try to distort. Systems reveal what actually matters. If you stand within the system you have mastered, you do not need to explain yourself. You have already established the outcome before the conversation begins. You are not invisible because you are quiet. You are effective because you are strategic. The younger ones may confuse silence with irrelevance. They may assume your patience is weakness. They may interpret your calm as uncertainty. None of that matters. You know what follows. You know the weight of preparation. You know how structure eventually reaches those who believe they can outrun it. You have watched it happen many times. You do not need to rush. You do not need to justify. You do not need to defend. All you need is alignment between action and principle. Let others perform. Let others demand attention. Let others chase impressions. You are beyond that stage of life. When someone underestimates you because you are quiet, let them meet you through consequences.